Look, I'd like to thank Carol and John for today, putting this on. It's such a beautiful property. I can't wait to get out there and have a look. So I'd like to thank. Where's Carol? Thanks, Carol. Thanks for hosting this event. It's a real pleasure to be here. And thanks to Martine and Jenny and the team for creating this event, particularly in these challenging times, because we've had a bit of a battle to get here, haven't we? On and off. But anyway, this is a perfect day, beautiful day today, so we're really pleased. And Emma and I are very excited to be able to present this together and share our story with you, with our journey into women in regenerative agriculture. That's a big topic. And because it's such a big topic, I decided to, and there's a lot to say, so I didn't get off the chat because I am a chatterbox. I thought that I would put it down in a reading format. So bear with me, it's a story, okay? And it's a long story, and I didn't want to get sidetracked and wander off over here. I wanted to give you, try and get a whole story thing for you so that you get the gist of really where we're at. So, welcome and thank you.
So our property, Australind, has been in the family since 1839, and I'm sure has seen every agricultural shift and movement under the sun. So we start our stories here at this little hut, intertwined as they are, as mother and daughter are, we're spanning the generations. This is a little wattle and daub hut that housed my grandmother's father, already a fourth generation farmer, making us the sixth and seventh generation. Traditionally, Australind ran superfine merino, while today it is a 4,000 acre property running Australian white self-shedding sheep and Angus cattle. And at 900 metres above sea level and the head of the Lachlan River on the Great Dividing Range, it's an incredibly special and important piece of Australia, which just makes people fall in love with it so much more.
And from my earliest memories as a small child, she was forever in conversation with people. No matter where my mum went, she always had time for chat. So creating a retail business was perfect for her. She could talk to someone new all day, every day, for as long as she wanted. We're all like that, aren't we? Quite often on her way home from work, when she was picking up a few groceries, she would run into someone on the street and begin another conversation. And if I was with her at the time, I knew we were going to be there some time. As a kid, I just wanted to get home and watch my favourite TV shows. But she had a real interest in people, no matter who they were or where she found herself, always finding out about their lives and what made them tick. Hence, she filled the shelves of her shop with goods and services they wanted or needed and created a business that survived nearly another 2 decades after she sold it. I lived a lovely childhood in town with a beautiful backyard to play in, full of trees that were already established and others that my mother planted. There were fruit trees, exotic trees and some natives, and lots of beautiful big flowering shrubs. It was a magical tree climbing playground and I always felt secure there. My dad kept the lawns neat and in order, and he transformed the old chook shed into a cubby house for me where I played dress-ups and dolls with my friends and neighbours. You know what I'm talking about? I remember having my own vegetable garden with the best growing carrots, beans and corn. I thought it was the best veggie patch around, and it gave me a real sense of wonder at the magic of growing food. I seemed to have a natural thumb. No one seemed to teach me, and I felt at the time that no one really was that interested in my vegetable garden except me. But that didn't bother me somehow. I was really happy in my own quiet paradise, and I felt rather good about it. It was a happy childhood for me. My mother grew up on the land, spending time with her father, helping in the yards, riding a horse, looking around at the sheep. She loved farm. They had two brothers who were traditionally expected to run the property, and they were given the first opportunity to do so. However, Mum married a town man and moved in. After several years of being a wife, raising my sister and me, creating and running this very successful gift shop, at 48, she was offered the opportunity to buy her brother's shares of the property and move from town with Dad and run this family established merino farm, Australind. That, for my mother, was her dream, and my father embraced the change with real vigour. However, during this big transition, I went off to boarding school with the assumption that I was going to learn the ways of life in a school full of girls, far away from the life that I knew, and I certainly did that. An interest in art became apparent to me, and I seemed to have a talent for the subject. So it was a natural course of action that I developed these skills. Farming was certainly not on the life path for me that I had intended for myself. Even though I spent periods of time at Australind with my cousins and being around the farm life, I never gravitated toward it. I think my mother had secret ambitions that one day I would be a farmer and carry on a successful business that she created and had passion for. And having no sons to carry on the farm, in the back of my mind, I had a sense that I was going to be the one who took the horse by the reins. And of course, the sheer practicality to keep a business that was already established going. It seemed like a logical choice to make. Easy? No way. I would think to myself, I'm interested in art. And that meant to me people, city, variety, left of centre thinking. The two just weren't connected at that time for me. So I left it. I did my own thing. And my mother, she did have a lucky break for a while. My sister married a chap who was employed operating excavators and big machinery. They had 2 children and they came to live and work on the property. Mum bought a big tractor and he began ploughing. He loved that. And he also would learn how to raise sheep and do all the other farm skills that are needed to run and manage a farm. It all looked pretty good. But their time on the farm endured for about 5 years until the marriage collapsed. And my sister, having to learn to be a single mum with her small children, told us that this situation was not very promising for the continuation of the farm as being at the top. However, my mum accepted this curveball and carried on happily with that and hired help, doing what she loved and doing the rest. Time went by. I was involved with art, had my own business, married the man I loved, who was a primary school teacher, and somehow ended up on an aviator property just outside Goulburn. Well, Dot, as my mum was known to many, saw this as an opportunity. Somehow, 300 sheep arrived on this property, and well, she would teach Michael instead how to look after them. We transformed a small shed into a one-stand shearing shed, which was quite beautiful. After all, she said, they can pay for the insurances rates on this parcel of land. That was a good business decision, it seemed. It was only about 3 years in that this good decision was thrown a curveball. My mum got sick and passed away, leaving my dad and her beloved Australind with no one at the helm. Naturally, Michael, with his newfound skills, considered leaving teaching to run the property, and that's exactly what he did. We stayed at South Hill and Michael travelled daily 20 minutes each way to work. All was great for many years. Emma and her brother Andrew grew up living a blessed life on this beautiful small farm. We had a bit similar to this. We had sheep, chooks, peacocks, wacky and supportive grandparents, easy access to town, a variety of musical activities, the works. We had it all.
I can 100% vouch for this, the best childhood. That little veggie patch of mum's turned into creating a fairy glen garden oasis at South Hill for a little girl like me. Rose gardens, cottage gardens. She had a knack for creating beauty wherever, whether through her art on a canvas or using the land as the canvas for her art. And this time as a child, I just accepted that agriculture was starting to become my thing. And I had a dad that included and began to mentor me in his new career that he was learning along too.
However, the millennium drought has really kicked in, and it got the better of Michael, my husband, who wanted to throw it all in. My whole being stood up in protest, and I scrambled for ideas to save Australind and our future, because at this stage, I already had a foot in the door. Mum got her wish. I was now committed to a farming life with Michael and was not about to throw it in. I knew that once the spirit was defeated, it was hard to make a comeback. I suggested that we sell our town property and we make the move to the farm. Andrew was already at boarding school at Southern ACT in Glenfield, leaving Emma to adjust to travelling on the bus to and from school every day, but that's what she did. She loved the little friends she made on the bus, and our neighbours had 2 little girls on the property who were the same age, and they had a lovely time together. But life threw us another curveball which changed our world dramatically. Michael was under threat with cancer. Sorry. It's all still so raw, isn't it? As many of us have experienced a curveball, it isn't about being defeated, although it can feel like that at the time, but about stepping up to the next level of who we are capable of becoming. Without making light of the situation, all that I say here is that it did take a lot of courage on everyone's part to pull through. This is very difficult. I didn't think it would be this hard. Thank you. Well, it is about generation, and it is about, what happened. We did lose Michael to the disease, but somehow we became strong and carried on in the good spirit that he would have wanted us to. Thought this would happen. Sorry, it's all right. We stayed and continued the journey of farming, being committed to each other, the home we were making, and the land we lived on, and the business of getting on to fulfil the life that we all dreamed of. I felt that things had a way of working out if you keep doing things that you love. I always had an affinity with Australind, mainly from an artistic perspective. I was happy to be there, but I had no idea how to run a farm and all the logistics involved. I had a fair idea, but I needed way more than that, so I hired and fired until things went along the path that I was tuned to.
It's this hired and fired that's the important bit, because, like I just said, I lost my connection to the land because with these managers taking the reins, I felt incredibly out of place as a 10-year-old to ask to be involved. If there was a kid around, well, it was their own child, confident in the ways of agriculture taught to them by their father. I would just be in the way. And I think this is the feeling that I sensed that they treated Mum with. I saw the struggle she went through, to get her ideas that she had for her property implemented, at least be understood or heard by the men that she was employing. She had an alternative way of seeing things, but it was threatening tradition rather than being seen as complementing tradition. No one took the time to help Mum to help herself. I knew it was so frustrating for her and lonely, but she bloody well stuck with it and found her own way of doing things.
Thanks, Emma. I trained in holistic management and joined a support group. I read, I attended many field days on many aspects of farming, and I hired consultants when I needed. And if the content spoke to me, made sense to me, I adopted the practice and I monitored the results. Basically, I just had a go, but everything I did benefited me, people who worked there in the landscape in one way or another. One of the main problems I noticed as a teenager when my mum and I were out in the ute doing the farm work was how run down the paddocks were and how degraded the creeks and the surrounding landscape was. There were very eroded and very bare areas where the grass once was. At that time, I couldn't imagine what to do about it. It was like a moonscape. I asked the question in my head, but that is where it stayed for many years. But like most things that don't sit right with you, bug you until you decide to do something about it. And that is where my journey into regenerative culture started. I did something. A friend suggested I talk to the Australind Catchment Management, which was active at the time, asking for advice on how to go about getting help in the way of a grant or something. I had no idea what was available, so I made the call, and that was the start of a beautiful relationship with the idea of getting the land healed.
This is the first land grant that Mum had implemented, and this dam is now not only a beautiful reservoir of water to slow down everything from our very high place in the catchment, but it also now has drought-proofed the property and waters about 2/3 of the property via a solar pump that pumps from that to troughs. So through this grant, Mum was able to get some amazing hard earthworks done, which this is a before and after of the same dam, which I was just saying now has relatively drought-proofed the property. We don't have to rely on the dams now, and it's all gravity fed to many troughs that we've been able to use as watering points, use fences to cut up the huge paddocks that traditionally is what our property was designed around, making our stock movements and grazing strategies much more controlled. And just a couple of other examples of these hard earthworks is these are called concrete flumes. I'm not sure if anyone's seen them before, but this would have been a huge big gully, and these really help transport the water safely from up high to down low without that tumbling effect that continues erosion. This is another kind. It's a rock flume, so it looks a bit more natural, but you can just see how it allows the water now to slowly seep down the catchment instead of just gushing and taking everything with it, and it's starting to seep the moisture out to the sides. And then this is an example of the direct drilling of trees on contour lines. So this was this dam was another earthwork that was put in, and some contour banks around there. You can see there's no trees below the dam, whereas today it's this beautiful haven down below.
So as time went by, I was trained how to build software earthworks, mainly with Cam Wilson. He was really a big help. And vegetation strategies to slow down the watering creeks on sheet erosion and gully headwaters. Understanding how the water flows on and through the landscape was key to understanding where to place the appropriate materials of rocks, mulch, hay, wood, sticks, seed and manure. I was encouraging Emma to help me and learn too. We would have a happy and venturesome day out together, packing a picnic and achieving results we were both pleased and proud of. When my son was home, he was happy and because he could see too that this was an important thing to do. We would rug up if it was cold, slap on a hat and long sleeve shirt if it was hot, take a bottle of water and just do it. Pick up a trailer load of rocks and branches, digging out manure from under the shed, anything that helped retain moisture on the landscape long enough for a seed to germinate and a plant to grow. We worked together with mutual respect for the land because we all knew to move forward was to move together doing something.
So these are just a few of the techniques in comparison to those huge big grants and huge earthworks. Not everyone has access to that. But these are little ones that we've learned from different mentors or made up ourselves, like slow flows, that I just thought we'd go through to show you if anyone has anything like this at home. So as you can see, we've got little rock flumes down the front. We've filled this little gully with brush and sticks, and we'll go through a few of the others as we go. So we like to start with what canvas are we starting with? This is a very bad sheet erosion or moonscape, as we call it. And this is where we start to implement different techniques. So we get old hay bales that are, going off for someone else, and we divide them up into the biscuits and make what we call slow flows along the contour lines of the sheet erosion. And behind us, we've collected a whole heap of brush. That's hawthorn, so the thorns nicely locked together, and we can use that to stabilise any particles moving down that surface. And they just catch moisture, they drop their leaves, adding that carbon to this area, which had nothing to start with. This is Cam Wilson, exceptional hydrologist and soil scientist here in the Canberra region. And he's showing us how to make a little rock flume where you strategically key in the rocks so that when the water's coming over it, it's not going underneath for our very sodic soil and just dissolving it. It's actually filtering over the top and slowing down that water. So he's buffering a head cut there, and you can see that was the finished product on the right. And this was the after picture. It's pretty beautiful. And what it looks like today. You can see all these little succulents and bits and bobs starting to grow. So that's the before moonscape, and that's what we're working with now. You can see these two trees on the reference point behind there. And that's a summer. So yeah, still doing they'll start to connect. And just another view looking up. This is an example of the manure. We can just put some manure from under the shed at the top, and then that starts filtering down some extra nutrients that were never there because it's so eroded. And that's the before and after of that one. Nice and stabilised.
We used backpacks before COVID, and they were really helpful. And we gave them a great experience.
Yeah. Sending these photos to them over in Sweden. They loved it.
That's just about community,
Yeah.
Did you do that through woofers or backpackers?
Work away.
Is that equivalent?
Yep.
Stay on the farm and
Yes.
give you some work?
Yeah.
Okay.
It was great.
It's a good system, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's a wonderful system, and we keep in
Here's another one.
contact.
Yeah.
You make a friend, you really do.
Well, this one's Julia. I was away at the time, and Mum, you two really bonded.
Sorry.
That's a head cut. If no one is familiar with what it is, it's just like a sheer drop where the water comes over the topsoil and eats under into the sodic soil. So she's doing a really nice job at buffering that out.
That was when we had the heat wave, where we'd start at 6 and we'd be working in, 35, 8 degree heat.
Using sticks and mulch. These are our slow flows. That's a before and after, so you can hardly see where the sticks are anymore. It's filled up that much. And this is just an example of it. You don't have to always just be strategic. It's great if you have the time, but this was just some sticks that my partner and I, we were building a fence. There were a couple of saplings in the way that we had to cut down to build the fence. We thought we can either leave everything here on the ground and it's just going to cover the grass that's already growing, or we can just chuck it in this huge area that was also a moonscape. It doesn't look like it's worth it, but you can see the little change in what moisture that can actually start growing, all these little dandelions and things. That's what we were looking at. We're like, oh, it's not worth it. But then you put it there and you're like, oh, no, that's going to start doing something. Direct drilling trees. So these were all direct drilled on the contour as seeds.
With Jenny's father,
Yeah.
pioneer of direct drilling.
Many kilos of seed.
Yeah.
Well, we're fortunate.
Yeah.
And they're just left to germinate off their own accord. They don't get watered or anything. And this is an amazing result of those trees that Mum was just talking about that with Jenny. And That's the before and after, 2007 to this day. It's pretty amazing. And that whole tributary's fenced off as well. It's beautiful. Another view. And this is what we're left with, these beautiful tree lines. And they not only create fantastic weather protection for the stock, but once it's recovered, it's either a haystack in winter or could be utilised in summer with a crash grazing to get rid of that trash a bit. Provides cover and corridors for small birds, bee fodder, nesting places, and in time hollows for a myriad of fauna, as well as lowering the water table and reducing the salt, increasing moisture and diversifying microclimates for flora diversity. And at the end, we have a few slides of the different habitats that we've been able to create through this and the different threatened animals that have now, been flourishing on our property.
That's one of Dad's. Look at that. So I remember the day I went through there on the bike and I just went, oh my God, this is like going down a cathedral. You know, it was just majestic. You know? It doesn't capture it there, but I'll tell you what, on the day I couldn't believe it to what we had, what we started with. It appears to me now, after all these years, that restoring the landscape is twofold. When you work in harmony with the land that supports you, somehow you help the relationships that are important to you. After getting a handle on soil erosion techniques and seeing results and outcomes they produced, my passion for the land only increased, and I was beginning to realise that the animals on the farm play a very important role regenerating the landscape, as John has discovered himself. Understanding what plants need for growth is key to growing grass, and learning and adopting grazing strategy is the master key to regenerative agriculture. Time spent grazing a plant and recovery time for a plant is a vital component to regenerative outcomes on the landscape if you are working with animals. To grow grass, for bugs to multiply, for birds to nest, diversity of flora and fauna to foster, and money in your pockets. Bottom line, harmony, balance, prosperity for man, land and beast.
Wow, sounds like the dream. And this is the kind of regen guru mentoring talk I was exposed to through all my high school years. We all knew early on that my brother, he wasn't interested in being a farmer. He was into computers, technology, and he studied mechatronics at uni, whereas I was outdoors playing with the plants and the animals. So I studied ag at school, and when it came to year 12 and thinking of uni, I naturally thought of doing a Bachelor of Agriculture. And if it wasn't for Mum pursuing her love to help and heal the land through an alternative way of seeing, doing and fostering regenerative agricultural methods, I may very well have never built that confidence to stick with a path that means so much to me and our family history. So I found my path too. I would learn skills, build knowledge and network with people so I could gather everything I could to bring back to the farm to help it thrive one day. So that's what I did. Packed up and studied a Bachelor of Agriculture at UNE in Armidale while having the best time of my life with the best people. And I was always staying open to conventional and new age ag. In my third year, I did a month of work experience at a farm in Forbes and happened to meet this beautiful soul. Stole his heart and eventually his labour of this mechanic turned station hand. This is my partner, Chris. With uni coming to an end, I listened to all my friends applying for graduate positions in research, agronomy, agent companies, but nothing sung out to me. So I think a gap year was the thing to have done. Now, I told Chris about our property's name, Australind, and apparently it originated from the tiny town named the same in WA. And I'd always wanted to travel there and do maybe a bit of historic digging to see if I could find more. Chris had always wanted to travel around Australia too, so we thought, well, fuel's probably going to be the most expensive part, why rush? Chris, being a very skilled mechanic, I was in the safest hands. 6 months, we travelled from the Daintree to WA, observing the different facets of Australian agriculture as we went, and if anything caught our interest. It was here over in WA that we landed a job at an extremely remote station in Shark Bay, spanning 300,000 acres from the Indian Ocean to the World Heritage Area of Shark Bay. It was arid, fragile, and simply amazing. We were the first Australians with ag experience to have ever been hired to trap the wild sheep and goats there. The infrastructure was unique, and it was tough. We were the only watering points in a 2 million acre area in about an area of 60 kilometres squared. So you can't even imagine the amount of animals introduced and native that were now dependent on this water source. This is where the importance of stocking rate to carrying capacity really hit home for us. We were so frustrated with the management of this incredible fragile area, but we just did what we could to make the greatest change that we could. We caught and trucked goats from the water yards, some of which we built ourselves. And it was really here, I'm smiling here, but I went through a lot of gender prejudice there. The manager saw Chris as a valued worker, being a mechanic, but he failed to really invest time to help me learn the physical, practical skills that we really needed to be out there, commonly just setting me the task of cleaning the homestead or anything at all. Some days, he wouldn't have anything for me to do. And when you're that remote, it's quite difficult to figure out what else you should do. So Chris mentored me to empower myself through practical skills, something my mum was never offered. But he believed in me, helping me believe in myself. And it's underestimated the confidence that it can bring of someone with that masculine energy that wants to teach you. It doesn't have to be a man. There are millions of women out there who know what they're doing, but it's just about asking and not being afraid to ask. So this is me actually finding more joy and purpose and confidence back on the land. We worked there a year in total, and on the off season we were part of the beach tourism, which was just great. And Mum was able to take a chance and come on out and meet us. If anyone would understand our battles with the people not understanding the land like we did, it was her, a breath of fresh air. We learned to love the land in any shape she came in. Leaving here, we travelled for 6 months more. Mum was back over east saying, we're going through drought, but, we knew what drought really looked like. We dreamed of the East Coast being lush and green, and we couldn't wait to get back and start implementing our, newfound ideas of how things should be kind of farmed back home. But then we got home, and this is what we came home to. Things were pretty bad, as we all really know. Went through a lot of horrible stuff then. I'm sure you all remember these kind of visions. Mum did a great job at keeping the stock and ground cover as much as she did, but we were nearing breaking point. So Chris and I created confinement pens, and long story short, we got through to that drought-breaking rain. And I had a great picture of that drought-breaking rain actually creating more damage because there's just nothing on the ground, and it really Did you take it out? I took it out. But I think it's a great segue into the importance of ground cover and what we're all really on about. This was a really distressing picture at the time. This is our property, and where you can't see is our boundary, because I'm not shaming our neighbour or anything, but it's the difference of the valuing your stock over your ground cover, and you just can't see. There's a whole mountain range behind there because his paddocks were just blowing away. So this kind of just brings me to where I bring up the topic of succession planning, because farming is bloody tough. we have to wear so many hats as farmers: mechanics, plumbers, in irrigation, stock handlers, dog trainers, grass and crop managers, weed and pest identification and eradication, weather forecasters, vets, business marketing, and financial savviness, and labourers. The list goes on. It's so stressful. But for our future security, we had to go through it for the longevity and benefit for all who were going to be a part of this business. And it's okay to share the load. When everyone has the same goal, it's easier to trust the process. We can get from this to our dreams through patience, listening, communication, and understanding. 100% ground cover and regeneration while being profitable is our goal, is our common goal. And I'm really proud and grateful to say that at 25, my mum honoured me with the responsibility of managing Australind, something my nan had to wait another quarter of a century for. So I think I'd just like to, I know we're kind of getting to the end of the time, but maybe we can start this with a bit of questions as well. But I just thought I'd take you through the evolution of regen methods that we've done with this paddock. So this is what Mum implemented. In the background, you can see hay bales, and all of this is actually hay that she spread by hand over the whole thing. That's all erosion there. But we're looking at this.
And the trees in the background.
And the trees, you can see them starting to grow.
Planted.
This is the same paddock. You can see all these trees have now germinated so much that they're above the horizon now. And what Chris and I were wanting to implement with this really dry, brittle paddock was a mixed pasture species. So we took a soil test and we had, it was deplete in everything. So we remediated it for what it needed to kind of thrive and come back to life. And that's just after Chris has slashed all the trash off and we ate it down really hard so that we didn't have to use glyphosate. We didn't spray it. We were direct drilling into that already standing microlina and native pasture. We picked up all the rocks and Mum was able to take them out to an erosion site. And when we don't have fancy equipment, we've got our rusty old seeder and our homemade roller there, which is very wobbly. And we just did our best to use what we had. And this is what our little pasture cropping experiment started to go. So we're really trying to get photosynthesis going in this paddock, bringing diversity, legumes, we've got the brassicas there, oats.
So is this sort of coincide?
Yeah, we were giving it a go because this was a really good paddock to just trial and see if that was going to work on our property. You know, we don't know if all of these techniques are applicable to our very unique property.
So you're drilling into a dormant pasture during the
Yeah.
winter?
It was
In the summer.
March. Yeah.
In the summer, when things were dry, dried off.
Yeah.
Not necessarily dry.
Yeah. And so that's what it looked like. It was very favoured by the kangaroos and we had pigs at that time, so it got a bit damaged through that, but this is what it looks like today. So much biomass. It's just incredible. 100% ground cover. We have had the best season ever, but all of these plants, it never would have ever grown that.
It's just a lot of speargrass and benthonia and not a lot else really.
And the next stage for this paddock is we let all that we planted go to seed, and then we'll just put the sheet back down here and get all of that matter back on the ground.
All that wispy stuff is microlina.
Yeah.
Seed, so that's phenomenal because it's a very valuable species.
And we just wanted to include this. We have put in an exclusion fence. So this is to control the kangaroo and deer populations that we have. And you can just see the difference. This is our side, and that's still our property, but Mum has left a corridor for the wildlife to thrive in. But it's just
to access.
Yeah. this is what we thought the grass, that was its only potential. We didn't ever see it grow more than that. So we were like, that's how deplete our soils are. The microlina doesn't grow. And this is just when it's had a chance to
rain. Yes, absolutely rain.
Absolutely rain. Nothing grows without rain.
But it started growing way before big rains.
100%, yeah. Not to say that an exclusion fence is the answer to everything, because we're also monitoring as we go, because as you could see, the wires are very low. And who are you? You might be keeping out the kangaroos and the deer, but who you're also keeping out? Little echidnas and things like that. So it's something we'll progressively monitor of what's happening. This is just another little image of our confinement pen that we used electric fencing with, and the sheep went so well with it. It was, emergency thing that we put in place, but they worked so well with our very cheap method of fencing, which was secondhand wire that we already had on the property and secondhand star pickets. So we were able to whip it up really quick and limit where the sheep could go. We didn't have to use a whole paddock. So we didn't have to use all of this land. We just picked a little bit that was necessary. And instead of leaving it bare, we planted a crop in there, and we've been using that for 2 years constantly for animals. It's brilliant. And last but not least, how important are these guys in the landscape? We couldn't do it without them. We need them. And I wish I'd put a photo of a big cow poo on there, because that's one of the, we're talking about biology, soil biology and all the macro and micro fauna moving around. And they have played such an amazing role in distributing different nutrients around the property. You can really see the cattle paddocks just thrive a lot more than where we haven't been able to move them, because we're still working towards those paddocks being able to cater the cattle. But they're just beautiful. These are our Aussie whites, fat fools. They do well better out, they do well out the back, but we'd love to be able to get the cows out there one day too. You've had them out there a couple of times.
Through the drought, we put some out there just to keep a few heifers, and I managed to save them, just with rotty old stuff out the back through the drought, so I was very pleased without minimising the ground cover on the good paddocks.
And just I'm sure you'll just get down and keep observing what's growing, because it will give back.
That paddock, when I was doing my first pro graze, I had the, way back, one of the first courses I ever did, I had the guy there and he's looking at, in this paddock, and there was nothing there. And I'm going, how can I grow grass? And he said, no, it's got potential. Oh my God. And I've only ever put 1/2 strength load of goodies on it once, and then grazed it strategically.
Yeah.
So we were always encouraging the perennials, and it's one of my best paddocks.
Beautiful.
Could have more diversity, but we're getting there. It's come a long way. It's come a long way.
We've got a lot of diversity over the whole property, so it's nice to have one paddock full of phalaris looking beautiful. A moment of appreciation. It's a beautiful paddock and a beautiful property. And so these are some of the habitats that have naturally been created, giving the landscape time to form. These are lilies growing up in those horrible scalded areas. This is on a little contour bank that was put in by those hard earthworks. Lilies. Yeah. We've got tree ferns growing. Beautiful.
Below that
oasis.
creek, below that dam, this little creek is it is a spring-fed creek, so there is always water in it, and we never lose those tree ferns. But just if you go up, just meters away, it's barren again. So, but to retain this, I've been strategic. This is all fenced out, so it hasn't been overgrazed at all, and we've let it germinate and carry on like it is.
And with that rain and giving the back a good chance to rest, these are some of the beautiful flowers that have come up. We've got beautiful blue devil. And this is over here, which we've fenced off. You can see that the kangaroos and deer absolutely love sitting down and munching its base, but it's like a grevillea or something. It's the only one on the property. So we fenced him off so he can start thriving. And yeah, I want someone to identify what it is, but he's got the most superb flowers.
Maybe when Jenny comes out.
Yeah, have to come and have a look. Tell me what it is. And these beautiful guys, I've got this little video of the gangs. So we really noticed them setting up shop on our property after the fires when a lot of that alpine area was burnt, and they just all came to our property, and usually they would come and leave for most of the year, but now they're here all the time. So I'm really flattered that, you know, we've got a halfway home for them to set up shop. That just had their nice noise coming in. And then you've got the glossy black. Beyond the exclusion fence, we've got our casuarina she oak forests, and they hang up there because they almost exclusively eat those little nuts there. And the superb parrot, we see them all over the place. And what's really special about them is that they like to live in a bit of a family. They've got mum, dad, cousins, aunties, uncles, and everyone needs a specific hole, a specific circumference, a specific depth in a tree that's all very close to one another. So that's a very specific place they want to live. So if we've got places for them to set up home, like I'm very proud that we can do that for them. So that's me talking for a bit.
So you can see here we've had workshops with Cam's taught us how to do everything. We've had different people come in and be a part of our processes, which has been very, very, very valuable. They were the Green Army, the backpackers, and people like yourself coming to learn how to do things on a field day. And it does put a lot of spirit, and it just makes it very special. You know, when you're working by yourself, you know, it can be isolated. But when you get the team going, and then there's this common bond, and today it's all about us women and the generation of women passing it on to your family. That's what's been a very big deal for us, and I think a lot of farmers are going through this, because what do you do when you've got a lot of children, you've got a big farm, and a lot of the time it just gets cut up, and if it can be retained as a parcel and carried forward as production, habitat, home for everybody, and a way of being economic viable for the country. We need farms, we need production, but we also need homes for habitat. So it's great to be able to work in harmony. So this ride for me has been very wild. It's been challenging, it's been fun, it's been rewarding, and the results give me great satisfaction. The more we can adopt these simple principles with healthy results, the more we can encourage ourselves to keep moving positively into the future with healthier outcomes for a wider environmental vision. It takes an open mind and a willingness to look at different ideas and principles from the past and the present, and with a healthy vision in your mind's eye. You've got to have a mental positive vision to work towards, because if you don't have that and you just see it all too hard, you just lose you. I don't know about anyone else, but I just need that, and I have a vision and I've written it down, and I always, when I get a bit down, I always just go, this is what I want. I want this, you know. So you've got to have that healthy vision in your mind's eye, and it's got to be profitable. I mean, you don't necessarily have it there and then, but you've got to have that vision because that's what spurs you on to work, for me anyway. I think we live in a wonderful time now in agriculture. Our scope to learn new ways and develop new strategies are forever emerging and easily accessible. The environmental quest is a huge topic, but answers, I believe, are in our reach. It's the old saying, if you keep focus on positive results, no matter how small they are, a lot of small positive results amount to large ones.
And I just want to say, summing up this, it's tough being in agriculture, let alone being a woman in it. We've all struggled at times, but hey, here is an example of 3 generations of women that have taken the reins. So I'm so proud, and Dot, my nan, would be ecstatic at the huge gap that you have sailed, my mother. And happy birthday.
So don't forget to tell your daughter, if you've got one, that she is beautiful, and make sure she also knows she's strong and smart and capable.